They fought the law and won. But inside their own home, they were losing everything that mattered. From the outside, the Brown family looked unbreakable. They weren't just America's most famous polygamous family. They were pioneers who stood in front of cameras and dared to say, "This is who we are. This is love." They took on the state of Utah, challenged a century-old law, and for a moment, it seemed like they had beaten the system. But behind that smile, behind the carefully edited scenes of Sunday dinners and family laughter, something darker was spreading. Quietly, silently, the bonds that once tied four women and one man together were unraveling, thread by thread. And if you think that sounds dramatic, wait until you hear what pushed Christine to finally slam the door on Cody and never look back. It all begins with a single moment. A look. A silence. A fracture that seemed small at first, but grew into an earthquake that would split the entire family in two. Christine's heart had been breaking for years, but no one, not even the other wives, knew just how deep the cracks went. She had smiled for the cameras, laughed at Cody's jokes, played the role of the devoted wife. But every smile was a mask, every laugh a cover. Behind closed doors, she was suffocating. And here's the part that no one expected. While the nation celebrated the Browns as a symbol of faith and family, Christine was quietly plotting her escape. But before we get there, we have to go back. Back to the moment when the dream of unity began to collapse. Back to when the wives noticed something that would change everything. Cody's heart was no longer divided equally. His attention, his loyalty, his love was drifting toward one woman. At first, it was subtle. The way his eyes lingered a little too long. The way conversations ended with her smile. But soon, it was impossible to ignore. Robin had entered the family as the newest wife, and with her came not only new children, but also a new kind of hold over Cody. A hold that Christine, Janelle, and Mary could all feel, but none could stop. And if you think that's shocking, wait until you hear what happened the night Christine finally confronted the truth. Because what broke her wasn't just jealousy, or favoritism, or even neglect. It was betrayal in its purest form. The kind that doesn't happen in a single moment, but in 1,000 little ways, over years of being silenced, overlooked, and replaced. Christine would later describe it as dying inside. But when she finally chose to walk away, it wasn't just about saving herself. It was about rewriting the rules of the entire family. And here's the question that haunted everyone. The one we'll circle back to later. When Christine left, was it an act of selfishness, or the bravest move anyone in that family had ever made? The cameras captured the smiles. The world saw the legal victories. But inside that house, in the silence between Cody and Christine, in the cold distance at the dinner table, the truth was waiting to explode. And when it finally did, nothing, not love, not faith, not even decades of history, could hold the Browns together again. They fought the law and won. But inside their own home, they were losing everything that mattered. On television, the Browns were pioneers. America's first family of plural marriage, to willingly open their doors to cameras and say, "This is us. This is love." For millions of viewers, the show Sister Wives wasn't just entertainment. It was history in motion. Here was a man with 4 wives and 18 children, facing down the law of Utah itself, and somehow managing to keep his family united under one roof. Or at least, that's how it looked. The Browns had become a symbol. To some, they represented freedom of choice. Adults living life on their own terms, no matter what the law or society thought. To others, they were a scandal, proof that polygamy was messy, unfair, and doomed to fail. But for the Browns, it was their reality, their faith, their attempt at something bigger than themselves. And when they filed that lawsuit, when they stood up and declared that love couldn't be outlawed, the nation listened. For a moment, they were more than just reality TV stars. They were revolutionaries. But while headlines praised their courage, and cameras captured smiling dinners and staged moments of harmony, something was happening in the shadows. A fracture. A silence that grew louder with every passing year. It started small. An offhand comment, a neglected glance, a dinner table where the conversation drifted one way, leaving others behind. Christine noticed it first. Maybe because she had always been the heart of the family. The one who cooked, who gathered the children, who tried to make plural marriage feel like unity instead of competition. Or maybe because deep down, she had always feared being overlooked. But whatever the reason, she felt it. The imbalance. The shift, the way Cody's presence seemed different around Robin. He smiled more. He listened more closely. He defended her when the other wives raised concerns. And while Christine buried those feelings behind practiced smiles, the silence in her heart was growing heavier by the day. The cruel irony was this. While the Browns were fighting Utah's bigamy laws, while they were proving to the world that plural marriage could be fair and balanced, Christine was discovering that inside her own home, fairness no longer existed. And if you think that sounds dramatic, wait until you hear what happened when she finally decided to stop pretending. Because the truth is, Christine had been carrying quiet pain for years. On camera, she laughed at Cody's jokes. She played her part, but behind the scenes, her eyes told a different story. She was exhausted, tired of feeling like the backup wife, tired of watching Cody's loyalty lean toward one woman, while the rest of them learned to live on scraps of his attention. And here's the part no one knew at the time. Christine wasn't just sad, she was angry. She felt betrayed. Betrayed by a man who had promised equality. Betrayed by a faith that told her this was God's plan. Betrayed by herself for staying silent so long. The more Robin's influence grew, the more Christine felt herself disappear. And while the outside world saw the Browns as united victors against an unjust law, Christine's reality was the exact opposite. She was a woman trapped in a marriage that was no longer a marriage at all. But what makes Christine's story even more haunting is how slowly it unfolded. This wasn't a sudden fight or a single betrayal. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Every time Cody chose Robin's side, every time he failed to notice Christine's pain, every time she swallowed her pride and stayed silent, a little more of her spirit broke. And in that silence, everything changed. Because silence doesn't last forever. Eventually it becomes too heavy. Eventually it explodes. Christine knew the cameras were watching. She knew the nation saw her as part of this larger-than-life family experiment. But in her own heart, she was already gone. She was just waiting for the moment. The push, the breaking point that would make leaving not just possible, but necessary. And here's where the story twists. While the Browns were busy rewriting the law, Christine was quietly rewriting her own future. She wasn't sure when, she wasn't sure how, but she knew, one day, she would leave. And when that day came, it wouldn't just change her life. It would change everything the world thought it knew about the Browns. Because the family that fought the state of Utah and won, was about to face a battle far more devastating. The battle within their own walls. And if you think Christine's quiet rebellion was the most shocking betrayal of all, just wait until you hear how the other wives began to crumble, one by one. For years Christine Brown carried the weight of silence. She smiled for the cameras, laughed at family jokes, and played her role as the fun mom. But behind closed doors, the cracks in her marriage with Cody had spread so wide, she no longer recognized the life she was living. The turning point didn't come in a single explosion. It came in fragments. Small moments of pain that piled one on top of the other, until her heart couldn't take any more. It started with birthdays. Little things. Christine noticed the way Cody showed up with extra energy for Robin's children. He brought gifts. He stayed longer. He gave the kind of affection Christine's kids had quietly stopped expecting. Her daughter once asked, "Why doesn't Dad want to be here?" And Christine, with that practiced motherly calm, told her it wasn't true. That he loved them all equally. But inside, Christine knew. Children see what adults try to hide. Then came the family meetings. What were once lively discussions became uncomfortable interrogations. If Christine voiced an opinion, it was brushed aside, often with Cody telling her she was being too emotional, too reactive, too much. But when Robin spoke, everyone stopped. Everyone listened. Even Cody's face softened. And Christine, sitting there with her folded arms and clenched jaw, felt herself fade a little more into the background. One evening, after yet another tense discussion about holiday schedules, Christine walked into her kitchen and leaned against the counter. The cameras were gone. The house was quiet. She stared at the dishes piled in the sink, the smell of dinner still hanging in the air, and whispered to herself, I don't matter here anymore. And in that silence, Christine made her first secret decision. She would not keep living like this. But here's the part no one expected. Christine's courage didn't arrive with fire and rage. It arrived with clarity. She began to look at her life with new eyes. Every conversation with Cody became a test. Every family gathering, a revelation. She was measuring, weighing, calculating her breaking point. And then, in one of the most devastating moments captured on Sister Wives, Cody revealed his heart without realizing it. He told Christine, bluntly, coldly, that he was no longer attracted to her. The words cut deeper than anything before. For Christine, it wasn't just rejection. It was confirmation of every fear she'd swallowed for years, that she was unloved, unwanted, that in Cody's world, her role as a wife was already over. And if you think that was the moment she collapsed, you'd be wrong. It was the moment she rose. Christine smiled, even nodded, as if his words didn't wound her soul. But inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Because once the truth is spoken out loud, denial is no longer possible. Cody's confession didn't destroy her. It unlocked her. From that day forward, Christine began moving differently. She stopped fighting for his attention. She stopped chasing equality in a marriage where the rules had already been rewritten. Instead, she poured her energy into her children, into her own independence, into a quiet plan that would soon shock everyone. The cameras captured glimpses of it. Christine packing boxes, Christine sitting with a steely calm as other wives argued, Christine saying less but meaning more. Viewers thought they were watching another season of family drama. What they didn't realize was that Christine had already left in her heart. The physical departure was just a matter of time. And when she finally told Cody, it was not with anger, but with certainty. I can't do marriage with you anymore. 8 words that shattered the illusion of the Brown family forever. The aftermath was explosive. Cody raged, insisting Christine was betraying the family, betraying him, betraying God. But Christine didn't flinch. For the first time in years, she stood in her truth. And when she packed her things, when she loaded her car and drove away from a life that had once defined her, she wasn't just leaving Cody. She was leaving decades of silent pain. It was liberation and devastation all at once. But here's where the story twists again. Christine thought leaving would bring peace. What she didn't expect was how her choice would unravel the entire family. Her departure wasn't just one woman walking away. It was a domino falling. One that would send shockwaves through every wife, every child, every fragile bond, holding the Browns together. And if you thought Christine's exit was the most shocking chapter of Sister Wives, wait until you see how the others began to question everything they had built. Because Christine's courage lit a fire, and that fire was about to consume the entire family. When Christine walked away, it wasn't just the end of her marriage to Cody. It was the spark that lit a fire through the entire Brown household. For years, Janelle and Mary had carried their own quiet storms, tucked neatly beneath the surface. But watching Christine gather her strength and step into independence forced them to ask the questions they had long avoided. If Christine can leave, why can't I? Janelle had always been the pragmatic one, the steady anchor in the family. While others wrestled with jealousy or affection, Janelle focused on structure, finances, housing, keeping the children's lives as stable as possible. She wasn't fiery like Christine, nor vulnerable like Mary. She was the strategist, the one who made things work when nothing else did. But beneath that calm exterior was a woman who had been neglected for years. Janelle's relationship with Cody had always been more about partnership than passion. They respected each other, yes. But love, the deep connective kind that sustains a marriage, had slowly evaporated. Cody's priorities had shifted, his time more devoted to Robin and her children, leaving Janelle in a state of quiet abandonment. She had tolerated it for years, convincing herself that this was the nature of plural marriage, that sacrifices were part of the deal. But when Christine left, something shifted in her heart. Christine's exit wasn't just a betrayal of the family unit. It was proof that leaving was possible, proof that there was life on the other side of Kody Brown. One night, Janelle sat at her kitchen table with bills spread out in front of her. The weight of responsibility pressed down harder than ever. She glanced at the empty chair across from her, where Kody should have been. But he wasn't there. He was at Robin's house again. He was always at Robin's house. Janelle exhaled sharply, whispering to herself, "This isn't marriage anymore. It's survival." And if you think Janelle's doubts ended there, wait until you see how they collided head-on with Kody himself. Because while Janelle was grappling with her loneliness, Kody was growing more rigid, more controlling, especially during the family's pandemic disputes. He demanded loyalty, obedience, unity under his rules. But Janelle, fiercely independent, deeply practical, refused to bow to ultimatums. Their disagreements became shouting matches. Their once civil partnership turned into open warfare. And behind those arguments was an unspoken truth. Janelle was already halfway out the door. Christine's courage had given her the map. Now all she needed was the strength to follow it. But if Janelle's doubts were quiet, Mary's were devastatingly loud, at least inside her own heart. Mary was the first wife, the foundation, the one who had entered this marriage with dreams of being Kody's forever partner. But over time, her love story turned into a haunting tale of rejection. Their bond had crumbled years earlier, shattered by betrayals, misunderstandings, and the infamous catfishing scandal that left Mary broken and humiliated. Kody never forgave. He never forgot. And as the years dragged on, he made it painfully clear that he no longer saw Mary as a wife. She became a ghost in her own marriage. The cameras captured it. Kody saying bluntly that he didn't love her, didn't want intimacy, didn't see a future with her. But Mary stayed. Year after year, she stayed. Perhaps out of loyalty. Perhaps out of hope. Perhaps because the idea of leaving terrified her more than the reality of loneliness. But when Christine walked away, Mary's illusion cracked. For the first time, she watched another wife choose herself over Kody, and she couldn't shake the thought. If Christine was brave enough to leave, what does it say about me that I'm still here? Mary would sit alone at night, scrolling through photos, memories, fragments of a love story that no longer existed. She replayed Kody's words in her mind, his cold dismissal, his refusal to repair what was broken. And she asked herself the question she had avoided for decades. Why am I still holding on to a man who has already let me go? And here's where the domino effect comes full circle. Christine's departure wasn't just one woman's escape. It was a mirror, a brutal, unforgiving mirror that forced Janelle and Mary to confront truths they had buried deep. For Janelle, it was the realization that her so-called marriage was nothing more than a business arrangement. For Mary, it was the devastating truth that her love had died years ago, and she had been clinging to a corpse of a relationship ever since. And if you think Kody saw these unravelings and tried to fix them, think again. His anger at Christine consumed him. His pride blinded him. Instead of rebuilding, he doubled down on control. He demanded loyalty, not love. Obedience, not partnership. And in doing so, he pushed Janelle and Mary even further away. Christine may have been the first to leave, but she wouldn't be the last. Because once one domino falls, the rest don't stand for long. And if you thought Kody losing Christine was the worst blow, wait until you hear how his entire family structure, the empire he built, began to collapse piece by piece. By the time Christine packed her boxes and drove away, Kody's world had already begun to shrink. But instead of reaching out to rebuild with Janelle or Mary, instead of repairing what was broken, Kody did the opposite. He withdrew further, clinging to the one relationship he still believed in. Robin had always been different. She wasn't just the fourth wife. She was the one Kody legally married, the one he adopted children with, the one who seemed to receive his full devotion. And as the family fractured, Robin's role grew from wife to fortress. Kody poured his time, his energy, his loyalty into her home. Nights that were once divided between households were now spent almost exclusively under Robin's roof. He told himself it was stability. He told himself it was what the family needed. But to everyone else, it looked like favoritism pushed to its final extreme. For Janelle and Mary, It was confirmation of what they had long suspected. Cody had chosen. He was no longer the husband of many. He was the husband of one. And yet Cody couldn't see it that way. In his mind, he was fighting for survival. Christine's departure had humiliated him. It wasn't just about losing a wife. It was about losing control of the story. For a man who once stood in front of cameras, declaring his plural marriage as proof of unity, the image of abandonment cut deep. So he doubled down. He told himself that loyalty was the answer, that if the other wives couldn't obey his rules, if they couldn't fall in line, then they weren't truly committed. But Robin was. Robin respected him. Robin defended him. Robin still spoke the language of family even as the family itself disintegrated. To Cody, that made Robin his last safe harbor. But here's where the empire began to rot from within. Because the more Cody clung to Robin, the more isolated he became. The Brown family wasn't just 4 wives and 1 husband. It was 18 children, scattered across states, growing older, forming their own opinions. And many of them were watching, silently as their father pulled away. They noticed who he called and who he didn't. They noticed where he spent his nights. They noticed that Dad no longer belonged to all of them equally. He belonged to Robin's house. Some of the children began to resent it. Others grew distant. The unity the Browns once prided themselves on. Birthdays celebrated together, chaotic dinners where laughter drowned out arguments, was gone, replaced by silences, separate gatherings, fractured loyalties. And in those silences, the empire Cody thought he was protecting was slowly crumbling. But Cody couldn't see it. His vision was narrowed by pride and anger. To him, Christine was the villain who had poisoned the family. Janelle was the rebel who refused to respect his leadership. Mary was the ghost of a marriage long dead. Robin was the only one who understood. He told cameras that Robin was suffering, that she never wanted this favoritism, that she cried for the family's pain. And maybe she did, but the optics were undeniable. Robin had become the center, and everyone else had become expendable. And if you think this favoritism only hurt the wives, wait until you hear how it tore at the children themselves. Because as Cody wrapped himself in the cocoon of Robin's loyalty, his relationship with his older kids began to unravel in ways he could never repair. Phone calls unanswered, tense confrontations. Sons and daughters, who once looked at him as a symbol of strength, now saw him as a stranger. Some accused him of abandoning them. Others stopped trying altogether. Cody, the man who once boasted of raising 18 children in love and unity, was now losing them, one by one. And yet, in Robin's home, the story was different. There Cody felt safe. There he could still believe in the dream of family. He convinced himself that the empire was intact, as long as Robin stood by his side. But what he didn't realize was this: an empire built on one wife, one household, one perspective, was no longer an empire at all. It was a bunker, a cage, and the walls were closing in. Because Cody's decision to choose Robin didn't just isolate him from Janelle and Mary, it set the stage for the most devastating loss of all: the collapse of his legacy, the very identity he had built his life upon. And if you think losing Christine was the end of Cody's downfall, wait until you see how his desperation to cling to Robin only accelerated the destruction of everything else. For years, the Brown children were the glue that held the family together. 18 brothers and sisters, spread across multiple houses, united by shared birthdays, wild game nights, and long summer afternoons, where chaos was the only constant. But as Cody retreated deeper into Robin's orbit, those bonds began to fray. What was once laughter echoing across living rooms turned into separate gatherings, fragmented celebrations, and a growing silence that no one wanted to admit out loud. The children saw what their mothers often tried to hide. They saw the empty chairs at dinner tables, the missed phone calls, the way their father's voice softened only when he was speaking to Robin's kids. And the older they grew, the less willing they were to accept it. It began with questions, small but sharp. Why does Dad spend all his time at Robin's? Why doesn't he come to our games anymore? Why does he care more about their house than ours? Mothers scrambled for answers. Janelle tried to soften the truth, reminding her children that Cody still loved them. Christine, before she left, carried the weight of explaining what couldn't be explained. And Mary? She stayed silent, unable to defend a man who had long since stopped defending her. But the children were not blind. They were not naive. And soon, those questions hardened into something else. Resentment, especially during the pandemic. When Cody's rules became iron chains, he imposed strict guidelines, demanding obedience from every household. But the rules felt inconsistent, shifting, always favoring Robin's comfort. When some of the older kids pushed back, Cody's reaction wasn't compassion, it was fury. He accused them of disloyalty, of betrayal, of endangering the family. And that's when the rebellion truly began. One by one, the older children started to pull away. Sons who once looked up to their father stopped calling. Daughters who once admired his leadership began to question his choices. Cody's vision of a united family collapsed as his children built walls of their own. The most painful fractures came between Cody and his sons. Arguments erupted, heated, unfiltered, raw. Words were exchanged that could never be taken back. The man who once prided himself on raising 18 children with love and stability was now watching those same children turn their backs on him. And in the quiet aftermath of those fights, mothers held their children close, while fathers sat alone in anger. But here's the devastating truth. This wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a clash of legacies. For years, Cody believed he was building something larger than himself, a family empire that would stand as proof that plural marriage could thrive. But the children no longer saw unity. They saw favoritism, hypocrisy, broken promises. They saw a father who preached about equality, but practiced devotion to one wife. And once children begin to question the story they were raised in, there is no going back. Some of them voiced it openly. If this is what plural marriage looks like, I don't want it. Others carried quiet bitterness, distancing themselves without confrontation. But the result was the same. The dream Cody had fought for, the dream that once carried them into courtrooms and national headlines, was dissolving in the hearts of the very people who were supposed to inherit it. And if you think the wives' departures were painful, imagine the wound of watching your own children walk away. Birthdays came and went with fewer calls. Holidays grew tense, each household splintering into its own orbit. Photos once filled with 20 smiling faces now showed smaller, tighter groups. The Browns were no longer a family. They were fragments. Cody, of course, blamed others. He said Christine poisoned the children. He said Janelle's independence undermined his authority. He said Mary's distance eroded unity. In his mind, the collapse was always someone else's fault. But deep down, even Cody must have felt it. The rebellion wasn't born from manipulation. It was born from neglect. The children had seen too much, felt too much. They were old enough to remember the unity, but wise enough to recognize its absence. And no amount of speeches, no amount of rules, no amount of blaming could erase what they knew to be true. Their father had chosen one side, and it wasn't theirs. And in that realization, the rebellion solidified. The next generation, the very legacy Cody had once boasted about, no longer stood behind him. They were forging their own paths, separate from his vision, separate from his authority. And as the children pulled away, so too did the fragile threads connecting the wives. Christine was gone. Janelle was restless. Mary was fading. And through it all, Robin remained. The last loyalist, the last believer, the last wife standing. But here's the twist. Even Robin's loyalty couldn't save Cody from the truth that was creeping closer with every day. Because a family can survive disagreements. It can survive distance. But once the children no longer believe in the dream, the foundation is gone. And if you think Cody's empire was shattered by Christine's departure, wait until you see how it collapsed under the weight of his own children's rebellion.